embodies the essence of individuality, creativity, and positivity, where we explore the latest trends and engage in lively discussions. Expect a mix of insight, humor, and mental health, social justice, and relevance that promises an enlightening and enjoyable listening experience, ensuring you don't miss out on this captivating adventure on Next Gen.
Radio Al-Ansar, 90.4 FM, Maritime, 105.6 FM.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is your host, Ria Mohammed on Next Gen, right here at Radio Al-Ansar, from exploring current trends into delving into classic issues like social justice and mental health. This show fearlessly tackles the pivotal subjects that resonate deeply within our generation. My mission is to embody authenticity, relatability, and humor, ensuring that even the most challenging discussions become accessible and engaging, creating a space where listeners can feel understood and entertained simultaneously. Now, today's topic of discussion is about politics and power, and relationships and humanity, where we will be discussing these 6 questions. So, for the topic politics and power, we will be discussing: is democracy still working, or are we still in denial? Can justice exist in an unjust system? And humans protect us or control us? And after the outbreak, we will be discussing relationships and humanity, as we will be talking about whether love is evolving or dissolving in the modern world. Are people replaceable, or do we pretend they are? Is vulnerability a strength? Now, here's one of the most relevant questions ever. Is democracy still working, or are we in denial? Now, this speaks not just within political systems on paper, but to the lived realities of people under those systems. So let's break it down in depth from its foundations to contemporary crises, right? Now, what is democracy really? Okay, now democracy is, in its classical definition, is a system of government by the whole population, typically through elected representatives. Now, at its core are values like popular sovereignty, political equality, and accountability, transparency, the rule of law, and protection of civil liabilities. But democracy isn't just about voting every few years. It's about a system that empowers individuals, people, protects rights, fosters civic participation, and ensures that leaders are accountable to the people. So let's think about it. Is democracy still working? In what sense? Now, the answer depends on how you define working. If we mean, are elections still being held? Are there democratic institutions in place? Then yes, democracy appears to be working in many places. But if we dig deeper and ask, are citizens truly represented? Do people trust the system? Are freedoms genuinely protected? Is there meaningful accountability? Are minors and minorities protected from the majoritism? Then we start to free and see these fractures. The indicators of democratic decline: rise of popularism. Right now, leaders elected democratically who then undermine democratic norms, for example, limiting press freedom, attacking judicial independence. Then we can look at disinformation and media manipulation. Now, elections are influenced by propaganda, misinformation, and population of social media. Now, another one is voter apathy and political disengagement. Now, when people stop believing that their vote matters, democracy suffers. Then we can look at elite capture and corruption. Now, democracies are often hijacked by political or economic elites, leaving ordinary citizens disillusioned and eroding institutions. So, from courts to parliaments, institutions meant to serve as checks and balances are often weakened. So, are we in denial? In many cases, yes. People cling to the label of democracy without confronting the fact that the system is no longer functioning as it. Think of it like this, right? A house with a beautiful facade but crumbling foundations. Now, the appearance of democracy remains, like elections, flags, constitutions, but the spirit is eroded. So, why the denial? Cognitive dissonance. We want to believe the system works, especially if we benefit from it. National pride. Accepting that democracy is just failing feels like admitting defeat. Then lack of alternatives. What's the best option? People fear instability that comes with radical change. So let's look at the digital age and democracy. Now, a double-edged sword, technology was once seen as a great democratization, But now, algorithms polarize people, surveillance undermine privacy, big tech companies wield power with little accountability. Truth becomes fragmented, people live in ideological echo chambers. Now, this makes consensus, crucial for democracy, harder to achieve. Then global perspectives. Now, in the West, particularly the US and parts of Europe, democracy is under pressure from internal polarization. In Africa, many democracies exist in the name but function as electoral autocracies. In Asia and the Middle East, hybrid regimes are common, some democratic elements but authoritarian control beneath. Globally, freedom indices and they are declining. According to the Freedom House, global freedom has been recascending for more than a decade. So, can democracy be saved? That's not all doom and gloom. Democracy is resilient, but only for but to persevere and preserve reinvent possible paths forward. Civic education. People need to understand democracy and defend it. Stronger institutions like courts, watchdogs, and the press must be empowered. Reform electoral systems to reflect true representation and reduce money influence in politics. Participatory democracy. Beyond elections, citizens' assemblies, deliberative forums, direct democracy tools, and global solidarity. By defending democracy isn't just local, it's global. The democracy is not dead, that is in trouble. To say it's still working without examining its condition is a kind of collective denial. Yet denial is dangerous. It delays the urgent reform. So we must ask ourselves, are we preserving the system because it works? Or because we're afraid of what it means to admit it no longer does? Now, that's a profound question. Can justice exist in an unjust system? It goes right to the heart of legal theory, morality, and the lived experience of people who navigate systems that often claim fairness but deliver inequality. So let's unpack a few angles philosophical, legal, social, and practical. Now, number one is defining the terms. What do we mean by justice and injustice? Justice generally refers to fairness, equality, accountability, and proper distribution of rights and resources. It includes distributive justice, so fair allocation of resources, retributive justice, fair punishment, procedural justice, fair process, and restorative justice, which is healing harm and restoring relationships. Now, an unjust system structure, political, legal, economic, or social, that is fundamentally skewed. It may discriminate against certain groups, favor the wealthy or powerful, deny people with basic rights or access the opportunities and their opportunities, enforce laws unequally, and an unjust system might still claim to be just this is where the real complexity begins. Number two, the paradox. Can justice emerge from injustice? Now, here's the torque for tension. Can something fair arise from something unfair? The answer is yes, but only fragments and never fully. Justice can exist with an unjust system, but it is often partial, fragile, or conditional. For example, a justice in a system corrupts judiciary who consistently delivers fair rulings. Now that's justice with an injustice. A social movement achieving fairer housing laws in a racist state. A just act with an unjust structure. A teacher protecting students' rights in an unfunded school system. Again, justice in an unjust space. Now, these are islands of integrity, moments where individuals or institutions uphold fairness despite the broader system, but they're often swimming against the tide. Now, let's look at philosophical perspectives. Now, natural law versus legal positivism. Now, natural law theorists like Aquinas or Martin Luther King Jr. argue that unjust laws aren't just true laws. So any justice that arises within injustice must come from morality overriding legality. Then we can look at legal positivists like H.L.A. Hart, who would say law is valid if making according to rules, even if it's immoral. Now, justice, then, is a matter of how laws are applied, even in a flawed system. MLK puts it best in his letter from Birmingham jail. An unjust law is no law at all. So for natural law thinkers, true justice can't fully just exist within an unjust system. It can only resist it. So let's look at systematic versus symbolic justice. So there's also a difference between systematic justice, which is fairness embedded in the system itself, like how laws are made and how wealth is distributed, and symbolic or performative justice, which are small wins or gestures that give the illusion of fairness without addressing deeper issues. Now, an unjust system might offer just outcomes occasionally, but without addressing root causes, poverty, racism, patriarchy, colonial legacies, those outcomes are expectations and exceptions and not the norm. Now, justice in South African, Nigerian, post-colonial contexts, this question hits differently in societies shaped by colonial violence, apartheid, military regimes, or corruption. So can we talk about justice when the poor can't afford lawyers, courts delay cases for years, political elites rewrite the law to shield themselves, land is unequally distributed generations after injustice? Yes, moments of justice do occur, but they are often contingent on struggle, not just the system's inherent fairness. Now, the role of resistance, justice as rebellion in unjust systems, justice is often an act of resistance. Whistleblowers, protesters, lawyers defending political prisoners, activists challenging discriminatory laws. Justice here does not just come from the system, it comes against it. It's counter systematic. Now, why does this matter? If we believe justice exists just because the system says it does, we risk being complacent. But if we recognize that justice within an unjust system is limited, hard-won, and fragile, then we understand the need to transform the system, not just to seek justice within it. So yes, justice can exist in an unjust system, but often partial, not full, individual, not institutional, temporary, not lasting, and hard fought, not guaranteed. So the bigger challenge is not just to find justice within injustice, but to create systems where justice isn't just the exception, but the foundation. So, alright, this one is layered. Do governments protect us or control us? Is the kind of question that feels simple at first glance, but when you pull back the curtain, it opens up centuries of philosophy, politics, law, and lived experience. So let's break it down properly, both sides of the coin, protection and control, and the gray area in between. Now let's think about it. Why is and what is government fundamentally? Now, governments are often institutions created to organize society. Their core functions typically include maintaining law and order, protecting citizens' rights and freedoms, providing public goods and services like education, healthcare, infrastructure, defending the nation like military and border control, regulating the economy, upholding justice systems. So, on paper, governments exist to serve, but that service often requires power, and with power comes potential and temptation for control. Number two is protection. Now, the ideal role of government. Governments protect us what and when they enforce laws that guard against violence, theft, and discrimination, etc. Regulate industries to safely and ensure like good food, water, transportation, and transportation. Provide social safety rights and nets, grants, healthcare, unemployment support. Safeguard against foreign threats like military and diplomacy. Respond in crisis, natural disasters, pandemics, and economic collapse. Now, this protection is meant to ensure that citizens live, thrive, and participate fully in society. Ideally, the governments are stewards for the common good. But here's the rub. To offer protection, governments must wield authority. Now, that's where control comes in. Now, control, necessary structure or oppressive force. Let's see. Now, control in governments isn't inherently bad. For example, laws against drunk driving, protective and controlling. Border checks at airports, which is a form of control designed for security. Taxation, a controlled mechanism to fund public services. When control becomes excessive, surveillance and censorship, and equal laws apply differently to rich versus poor, coercive, military, or police brutality, invasive, tracking your data without your consent, it shifts from legal and legitimate governments to oppression. Now, the historical balance, protection versus control. Let's look at a few global and historical examples. Now, apartheid in South Africa claimed to be maintaining law and order. In reality, controls to the majority through racial laws, post systems, and land possession. Control masquerading as protection for a select few. Okay, anyway, I'll be back right after a short ad break. I'll see you soon.
كمان بياني صغيرة ربي ارحمها. Open your eyes, my little one. Not long ago I was also young. When you wake up and hold your own, know it twinkle, there's some lessons you'll learn. By the time you learn to love, you have to learn to love. Since one day I'll be leaving you, but hold on tight like you once did. When you get a chance, say a prayer like this. ربي ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. ربي ارحمهما ربي ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. ربي ارحمهما. And grace and past have turned to stone, and one day we'll all be joining them. Pray you stay firm, hope you stay calm. Pray you always learn from the wisdom and kind. By the time you learn to love, you have to learn to lose. So one day believe in you, but hold on tight.
This segment is brought to you by Kenfield Auto, your RMI approved service and repair specialist. 236 Bridgefield Road, Overport. Kenfield Auto.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا افتح بيننا وبين قومنا بالحق وأنت خير الفاتحين.
Alarm start.
Kenfield Auto.
Noisy brakes.
Auto.
You for a service.
Kenfield Auto. Kenfield Auto. Answer to all your car problems. Your service and repair specialist for your VW, Audi, Suzuki, Toyota, or just about any vehicle. Kenfield Auto, your RMI and insurance approved workshop to handle them all. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport. Call us on 031 207 2399. Kenfield Auto.
The slice of life. Just 9 Rand 50 a loaf. More than just bread, it's a lifeline. For only 9 Rand 50, you can help feed orphanages, old age homes, and communities in need. Every loaf goes to someone who truly needs it. Share the warmth. Share a slice. Together, we can make a difference. Call Outreach on 031 208 1601.
You give water, reaching out to drought-affected areas, bringing them to life. Fresh water to drink, to clean, and to grow. That's the power of water. Donate now to Islamic Relief.
We've been nominated. Radio Ansar has been proudly nominated in the Best of Readers' Choice Awards 2025 under 3 exciting categories: Best Local Radio Station, Radio Al Ansar; Best Local Radio Shows, Urban Woman and Afternoon Jam; Best Local Radio Personality, Razia Language. We're deeply grateful for your support and nominations. Now let's make it official. Cast your vote and help us bring this home. Visit bestofsouthafrica.co.za/Durban, or simply scan the QR code on our social media pages to vote directly. Head under Entertainment section and submit your votes. Voting closes 11th May 2025 at midnight. On behalf of Radio Ansar, we thank you for your continuous love and support.
With 49 years of experience in the motoring industry, Metro Car Sales has been proudly serving you since 1976. Need a great deal on your next car? We've got you covered. We offer in-house finance arranged in 1 hour. So, what are you waiting for? Call us now on 033 3942 595. Visit us today at number 1 Bosho Street, Petermarisburg. You can also check out our amazing deals online at www.metrocars.co.za. Metro Car Sales, your number 1 dealer you will.
Radio Al Ansar, keeping you in the loop.
It's Ria Mohammed here, hosting the Next Trend show on Radio Al Ansar. It's not just a radio show, it stands as a powerful movement in its own right. It embodies the essence of individuality, creativity, and positivity, where we explore the latest trends and engage in lively discussions. Expect a mix of insight, humor, and mental health, social justice, and relevance that promises an enlightening and enjoyable listening experience, ensuring you don't miss out on this captivating adventure on your next gen. Okay, I'm here about Ria Mohammed on Next Gen. We are talking about politics and power. Now, the historical balance, protection versus control. Now, let's look at a few global and historical examples. So, apartheid in South Africa, as we all know, claimed to be maintaining law and order. So, in reality, controlled the majority through racial laws, persistence, and land dispossession. So, control masquerading as protection for a select few. Then the COVID-19 pandemic. My government imposed lockdowns, mandated vaccines, closed borders. So, were they protecting public health? Yes. Were they also asserting unprecedented control over movement and commerce, even speech? Yes. Now, this shows that protection and control are often intertwined and context is everything. Now, let's look at the philosophical angle. Now, social contract theory, thinkers of like Hobbes believed we give up certain freedoms for protection. In return, the state keeps us from descending into chaos. Locke said governments mustn't protect and must protect natural rights like liberty, property, and if they don't, we have the right to resist. So think about it. How much control are we willing to accept in exchange for protection? And who decides where that line is drawn? Now, who's being protected and from whom? Now, this question becomes even sharper when you ask protected from what? Controlled by whom? Who benefits and who pays the price? So, for example, laws might protect corporations like property more than workers' rights. Police may protect the elite's interests while criminalizing the poor. Then borders protect wealthier nations while keeping out vulnerable migrants. So often protection for some, control is for others. And now, are we complicit in our own control? Now, in the digital age, we voluntarily give up huge amounts of data to governments and tech companies like CCTV, biometric ID, online surveillance, and much of it is framed as safety. But here's the irony. We're surveillance and survived, sorted and tracked more than ever. And we normalized it under the banner of convenience and security. The governments can now control us and not just our movement, but our minds through media, algorithms, and narrative manipulation. So, are we protected citizens or managed subjects? Now, can governments do both at once? Now, absolutely. In fact, the most always does. Think of the government as a knife, okay? The hands of a skilled servant, it heals, and the hands of a dictator, it wounds. But here's the difference. How is power distributed, checked, and questioned? Now, a democratic, transparent system with active citizenry can use control wisely. An authoritarian regime uses the same structure for domination. Now, the answer lies in accountability. Whether governments protect or control us depends on the strength of democratic institutions, the freedom of the press, the power of civil society, the civic awareness of people. A government left unchecked will always drift toward control. But a government held accountable through courts, protests, and journalism, and vote can be shaped to serve the people. So, what do you think? Do the government protect us or control us? Let me know at WhatsApp at 060-904-1056. I love to hear your perspective and what you think about this. Now, our next topic is love and humanity. Let's talk about this. It's pretty interesting. Now, this is a soulful question, one that blends society and sociology, psychology, culture, and even technology. Is love evolving or dissolving in the modern world? So it isn't just about romance, it's about how we form connections, how we value relationships, what we value in relationships, and how modern life is shaping our deepest bonds. So let's break this down fully, historically, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. First, what is love? Now, before we talk about whether it's evolving or dissolving, we need to recognize that love has never been one fixed thing. Across cultures and time periods, love has been romantic longing, spiritual union, familial duty, social alliance, economic arrangement, eros, which is desire, and friendship and familial love. Now, in the modern world, we tend to focus heavily on romantic love as the ideal, but that's fairly recent obsession. Now let's look at historical context. Now, love has always evolved in the past. So marriages were often strategic and not romantic. Love grew after marriage, not before. And in some cultures, love was seen as disruptive or dangerous. Now, the modern idea of falling in love with the one only emerged wildly in the 19th and 18th century. So, love has evolved many times over. Now, the question now is, what direction is it heading in and toward today? Now, science of love is evolving. Now, we will get more freedom of choice. So people can now, in theory, choose who to love based on emotion, not duty or social cause. We're less bound by religion, race, family expectations, and economic needs. Now, that's progress. It means love can be more authentic, more mutual. Now, the diverse forms of love are more visible. Now, love has become more fluid, exclusive, and more defined by consent and communication rather than tradition. And C, emotional intelligence is rising. More people are learning about attachment styles, boundaries, trauma, love languages. This self awareness is helping some people and some relationships deepen rather than dissolve. But signs of love is dissolving. Now, a rise of disposable relationships. We live in a swipe culture where love is increasingly treated like content, fast, filtered, and forgettable. Ghosting is normal, intimacy is often transactional. Now, loneliness is increasing. Now, paradoxically, in an age of constant connection, many people feel more alone than ever. Mental health struggles, urban isolation, and digital distraction erode real intimacy. And C, fear of vulnerability. In a world that rewards self sufficiency, being emotionally open can feel risky or even weak. Some people armor up, protecting themselves, but also keeping love at arm's length. Now, D, unrealistic expectations. Media and social platforms sell us curated fantasies like Instagram perfect relationships, the idea of soulmates who complete you, the belief that love should be a constant bliss. Now, these myths set people up for disillusionment. Now, the role of technology, revolution or ruin. Now, technology is a double edged sword when it comes to love. So, the pros are long distance couples can stay connected, people can meet across borders, cultures, even time zones. Therapy and education about love are more accessible than the cons. Algorithms shape who we see, often reinforcing bias. Dating apps can foster choice overload. People are treated like options and not humans. Social media creates pressure to perform love rather than experience it. So we're more connected, but are we more intimate? Now, capitalism and love. Modern love often unfolds in a system of momentous everything. Like weddings and industries, romance is sold through holidays, gifts, and Netflix storylines. Even self love is becoming and being commodified skin swim retreats. There's nothing wrong to be enjoying nice things, but the risk is love becomes a lifestyle accessory and not a lived experience. Now, the spiritual lens. In many spiritual traditions, love is the highest state of being. It's not about ownership or chemistry, it's about presence, compassion, service, and union. Now, in that sense, love can't dissolve, it's eternal. But in a world spinning faster and faster, we're forgetting how to slow down enough to feel it. So, what's the answer? Is love evolving or dissolving? And I see it as a bit of both. It's evolving in terms of identity, freedom, awareness, and openness, but it's dissolving in depth, commitment, presence, and sacredness. Now, the modern world often offers more possibilities for love than ever before, but also more distractions, more disconnection, more fear. So love is not disappearing, it's being challenged. Now the task is now to how to redefine love not by romantic cliches, but by deep presence, real connection, radical honesty, emotional responsibility. So in other words, if love is dissolving around us, we have to become the ones who can evolve it forward. So are people replaceable, or do we just pretend they are? Now, that's one of those questions that cuts the right to the soul of how we value human beings, both in the personal and societal sense. Now, it's a question soaked by, in the personal and society sense, where it's questioned by emotional depth, but also tangled up in economics, culture, identity, and grief. So let's unpack it properly. Now, first things first, what do we mean by replaceable? Now, being replaceable can mean it in different things depending on the context. Like in the workplace, can someone else do your job if you leave? In relationships, can someone else love you by the certain way the certain person lives? In society, are we seen as unique souls or functional parts in a machine? Now, the question forces us to confront how we define work. Is our value based on what we do or who we truly are? Now, in the workplace, people are often treated as replaceable. So, economic systems reward efficiency, and capitalist systems, especially people who are often valued for productivity over personality. So, if you rent your job, someone else will. Layoffs often happen in seconds. Hiring takes place through algorithms. Even leadership is framed as transactional. So, what can you bring to the table? In this world, replaceability is practical. Someone leaves, the workflow adapts, the system moves on. But B, here's the catch. Skills are not replaceable. Humans are not. Now, sure, someone else can write the emails, file the reports, close the cell, but can they bring your energy, your intuition, your humor, your quiet moral compass? Now, the system pretends that people are replaceable because it's easier to manage than facing the messy truth. Every person carries an unrepeatable fingerprint. Now, in relationships, we might try to replace people, but we don't succeed. Now, this is where emotional core of the question really lands. Now, breakups, deaths, falls out, we lose people and life keeps going. So new friendships form, new partners arrive, but deep down, most people know you don't replace people. You learn to love without them. Sorry. Grief isn't healed by substitution. It's carried, transformed, honored. B, sometimes we pretend people are replaceable as a defense mechanism. So to avoid pain, we often tell ourselves we can move on quickly. We distract ourselves with rebound, shallow conversations, or overwork. We buy into the illusion of abundance culture. Now, there's always someone out there. There's always someone else out there. But emotional truth hits differently at 2 a.m. There are certain connections that leave echoes in your spirit. That kind of presence. That's not something you replace, but something you remember. Social media, the illusion of visibility. Now, in the digital world, people are often treated by content, unfollowed, blocked, muted, swiped left. Now, this fosters the idea that people are often interchangeable. Now, that connection is how as shallow as a profile bio. But ironically, loneliness is on the rise. People crave deeper bonds. We want to be seen, not just scrolled through. So we pretend people are replaceable while quietly yearning for someone who makes us feel irreplaceable. So, from a spiritual lens, you are never replaceable. In many traditions, be it Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, or more universal philosophies, the human soul is unique, sacred, unrepeatable. Now, your presence in this world is not just a once off event in all of your cosmetic and cosmic history. No one before or after you can mirror your exact consciousness, your specific way of loving, laughing, creating, or dreaming. So even if your function is replaced by your essence, that cannot be. So, then why do we pretend? And that's because it's easier. It's easier for businesses to move quickly. It's easier for people to avoid grieving. It's easier to believe we are not deeply connected to those around us because connection makes us vulnerable. Every now and then, something cracks through the pretending, a memory, a dream, a heartbreak, a piece of art. When we reminded that people matter far more than systems want to admit. So, that people are replaceable in a function, but never in essence. You might leave a job and someone will do your tasks. You might leave a relationship and someone else will hold their hand. But your voice, your soul print, your way of showing up in this world, that same and it stays unmatched. So no, we don't just pretend people are replaceable. We pretend not to care that they aren't. So let's dive into this. Is vulnerability a strength or a liability? Now, this question sits as the crossroads of psychology, culture, leadership, trauma, and love and identity. It's as raw as it is profound because we ask it to wrestle with how we chose and choose to show up in the world with armor or with open hands. So let's break it down a bit. What is vulnerability really? Now, vulnerability is often misunderstood. It's not weakness, it's not fragility, it's the state of being open to emotional exposure or risk without guarantees or safety or control. Now, it's like saying I love you without knowing the feeling is mutual, or I need help when pride would often rather suffer in silence. This is who I am, even if you're afraid it won't be accepted. It's choosing honesty over performance, connection over perfection. Now, the case of vulnerability as a liability, now let's be real, there are contexts that vary where vulnerability can feel dangerous, like in toxic environments, like at work. Opening up about stress or burnout can be used against you in competitive workplaces. In some relationships, sharing feelings with emotionally unavailable people can lead to dismissal or manipulation. And in society, marginalized groups are often punished for vulnerability, seen as too emotional, too sensitive, or not strong enough. So, in spaces that lack trust or compassion, vulnerability can expose you to harm. And B, culturally and generationally. Many cultures teach boys not to cry, women not to speak up, and elders not to show weakness. Vulnerability can be seen as soft, even shameful, especially in places where survival requires toughness. So, in those settings, vulnerability is not just a liability, it's a risk to reputation, safety, and sometimes even livelihood. But now, vulnerability as a strength. And here's the deeper truth: vulnerability is where we see the real power and where that leads. So, it's the birthplace of authenticity. You cannot be real without being vulnerable, pretending to that costs energy. Before you create distance, vulnerability strips away and says, "This is me, fluid, evolving, true." And when that honesty meets safety, it builds trust like nothing else. Then B, it builds connection. People don't bond over perfection, they bond over shared struggle, over me too, over I'm being there. Vulnerability invites others to drop that mask too. As Bound says, vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. See, it takes courage. Strength is not just a feeling, strength is in the feeling, in feeling everything, and still choosing to stand true. To say, I don't have it all together, or I'm scared, or I failed, that is bold. That's rebellion in a world obsessed with image. Now, in leadership, vulnerability inspires trust. The best leaders, whether in politics, business, or community, aren't the ones who pretend to have all the answers. They're the ones to admit mistakes, ask for empathy, show empathy, let people see their humaneness. But why? Because that kind of relationship is relatable and not robotic. And people follow human beings, not personnel. So, in love and relationships, vulnerability is the whole. You can't love deeply without vulnerability. Love is always the risk. Will then leave, they change, will I lose myself? But to love with showing your real self is to never be fully loved and vulnerability how people see you and not just your curated version. So in healing your mental health, vulnerability is where the shift begins. You can't heal what you refuse to feel. Vulnerability is the turning point where you stop pretending, stop naming your pain, ask for support. It is the moment where survival mode gives you and gives that way to truth, and truth is the beginning of transformation. Now, the tension, knowing when and where to be vulnerable, discernment is the key. Vulnerability without boundaries is not strength, it's exposure. You don't owe your deepest self to everyone. You choose who has earned the right to your witness and your truth. Vulnerability is a gift, not a performance. And strength includes protecting your energy while staying devoted. So the paradox is the answer. So is vulnerability a strength or a liability? Well, it's both. It's a liability in unsafe spaces versus unsafe people. But in the right hands, it becomes your greatest superpower. So vulnerability is the bridge between isolation and connection, between fear and growth, between surviving and living. So, we pretend strength means having no cracks, but the real strength is letting the light shine through the cracks. You don't have to choose between being strong or being vulnerable. You're strongest when you are with both. So, time to wrap up. I'll have the today has been absolutely wonderful. I will be back in fact this week, Saturday, the 26th of April, where I will be hosting Next Gen Live from the DSF Durban Shopping Fest. 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. So join us. Come have some fun. You really won't want to miss it. And once again, I will be back next week, Thursday as well, the 1st of May from 2 to 3 p.m. And Allah. Assalamu alaikum.